Spider-Man, one of the most popular characters in all of Marvel. He is widely known for his great power and great responsibility and has existed within many different mediums, whether it be in TV shows, movies, games, etc. In Marvel Snap, Spider-Man has always been a popular pick due to his consistency and lack of frequent balance changes, leaving him to be a constant in the meta no matter where or when you look. Since the game's release, Spider-Man has only seen 4 balance changes in the almost 3 years it has been out. While this card's history isn't as rich or turbulent as, say, for example, Goliath, Spider-Man still had his time where he wreaked havoc on the meta, frustrating many players in the process, which eventually led to some drastic changes to the card. Why was Spider-Man so controversial? Why did it do so much damage to the game? We'll find out today on the history of Spider-Man. While this card is extremely familiar to those who have started playing the game within the last year or so, Spider-Man used to be drastically different, sporting a completely different ability. Spider-Man was part of the initial batch of cards that released with the game when it was in its beta phase, which started on May 24th, 2022. On release, Spider-Man was a 4-cost, 2-power card which read, on reveal, your opponent can't play cards at this location next turn. As you could probably imagine, this ability was completely oppressive and annoying to go up against. This card was largely responsible for spawning the controversial archetype known as Lockdown. He was an integral and powerful piece to these deck types. Lockdown decks look very different nowadays with all of the new card additions, but Spider-Man perhaps was the card that started it all, which is fitting for a character as popular as he is. While I can't say this for certain, it seemed that the devs wanted a popular character to have a strong ability, making him popular and fun to play. However, this card was a double-edged sword, in that it was fun to play, but extremely oppressive and unfun to play against, since your ability to even play the game was taken away by one singular card. Spider-Man would remain as a 4-2 until September 21st, 2022, where it actually received a buff. The buff was relatively minor, as the cost stayed the same and power was only increased by 1, making it a 3-power card instead of a 2-power card. The team was extremely brief in their reasoning for this change, only saying that Spider-Man is a bit weak right now, so we're giving him an extra power to help him out. Now, it's hard to say what the meta was like during this time. There is no available data that would indicate how popular or unpopular Spider-Man was during this time. I hadn't started playing the game during this time, I hadn't quite found it yet, so I can only guess that this card was seeing low play rates, at least low enough to warrant a buff. In today's community, a card like this getting a buff would cause outrage and confusion, and the meta would change overnight for better or for worse. Spider-Man stayed in this state for around 9 months, which is quite long for a game like Snap, which now receives regular balance updates every other week or so. Again, it's hard to say what the numbers were at the time, but it's clear that Spider-Man was becoming too strong and too popular for the wrong reasons. On June 8th, 2023, Spider-Man received a little bit of a quote-unquote nerf. Instead of being a 4-3, Spider-Man would increase in both cost and power by 1 point, making him a 5-cost, 4-power card while keeping the same text. As stated by the team, the reasoning for the change was, Spider-Man performs very well in multiple decks like High Evolutionary, Lockdown, and Galactus. We want to avoid these kinds of playstyles being too powerful as they are frustrating to play against, so we've decided to adjust Spider-Man to limit his play in combos like Spider-Man into Professor X. While this does put him at the same cost as his Lockdown peer Professor X, we think that their effects are distinct enough that they can both sit at a 5-cost. I believe the intention behind this was to bring down Spider-Man's flexibility in these lockdown decks, making you choose to play Professor X or Spider-Man on turn 5, instead of having the opponent deal with essentially 2 Professor X's on back-to-back turns. However, this would also present another annoyance, as you can essentially win a lane on turn 5 without any potential for counterplay. You see, the problem with Spider-Man wasn't his cost or power, it was his ability. It was too powerful and too oppressive to forever live in that state. This sentiment would ring true as Spider-Man would continue to be a problem in the meta, calling for a historic rework at the time. Just 2 months after its last patch on August 8th, 2023, Spider-Man would be entirely reworked into more of what he looks like today. His new version sported a cost of 3 and a power output of 5, with a text that read, on reveal, move to another location and pull an enemy card from here to there. As stated previously, this change was pretty historic, and was overall something that needed to happen for the health of the game. The devs had quite a long-winded response and correspondence with this change, so I won't read all of it, but here's a little of what they said. Let's start on the mechanical angle. The previous Spider-Man incarnation was a polarizing card. It prevented your opponent from playing cards at a location, a frustrating experience. It was most popular following Wave into Galactus, or on Lockdown decks, which are both decks that use combinations of cards to reduce the total play space of the game for your opponent. We want some of that. The game needs a variety of strategies, but we don't want those decks or even one of those cards to be the best in the game. Our best cards should be cool and awesome. There's an irreconcilable dissonance in having one of the most popular characters in the Marvel canon attached to an effect we don't want to be popular. Discovering Spider-Man in our game should be a great experience. Since launch, we've also added more Spider-Verse to the game, and seen players enjoyed the theme of movement for those cards, so we're making a change and bringing Peter in line with the rest with the new ability. Mirroring a little of what the devs stated, I think it's a hard middle ground to find with a character like Spider-Man. Being arguably the most popular character in Marvel, Spider-Man should feel rewarding and at least fun to play. He doesn't necessarily have to be this great performing card with a powerful ability that feels like a catch-all. He just needs to be at least fun to play with while also being fair. I think Second Dinner found that middle ground with his change, making the game healthy while also still making Spider-Man fun to play. It seemed the devs were happy with this change and where the card was at, given that it remained in that state for almost a year and a half and wouldn't receive another balance update until January 16th, 2025. Which is also its most recent balance. They simply took Spider-Man from a 3-5 to a 2-4, keeping the text the same. The team said, "This is a simple buff for the Scream decks to counterbalance some lost power, but it also makes Spidey a stronger potential option for some of the other decks that could use the buff, like more traditional move decks. As one of our most popular characters, we also want to keep Spidey positioned at an exciting rate for gameplay." As they stated, it was a simple buff, but sometimes simple buffs can make a big difference. Spider-Man was a must-have in move-based decks, especially with the release of Scream. Going down to 2 cost created more play flexibility, allowing players to play him more reliably on later turns. In this case, the benefits of the cost reduction far outweighed the negatives of the power reduction, making Spider-Man a solid option in the right decks. While he hasn't had many balance updates since the release of the game, Spider-Man certainly has come a long way in Marvel Snap. He's always been meta relevant no matter what state he was in, but with the new additions such as Scream, Spider-Man has never been more popular. Sure, there is a little bit of randomness with his ability, but the potential benefits outweigh the possible negatives given the current synergies with the card and the archetypes he belongs in. Spider-Man currently holds around a 60% win rate, which is pretty good, but beyond the numbers, he just feels fair to play. There isn't often where I'm playing and I think Spider-Man is just quite unfair. His randomness can both win and lose games, which I think is a fair balance for a card like this. Spider-Man himself isn't inherently annoying, but the decks he goes in surely are. But what do y'all think? Is Spider-Man better now than he was a few years ago? Should he go back to his old state, or should he be reworked again? Spider-Man should always be a fun and popular option, but we'll see what the future holds for this famous card.